90 years ago, the Virginia Farm Bureau made our local farmers a promise to protect and preserve a way of life they work so hard to establish. Today, our insurance agents work to protect all Virginians, not just farmers. We want to keep Virginia, Virginia. More information is at farmbureauadvantage.com.
The remarkable soybean. From its oil, we get products like ink, candles, and paint. From its meal, we get a high-protein fiber used in foods and animal feeds. Natural soy is replacing chemicals and products you use every day. You can learn more about soybeans at vasoybean.com.
Farmers are relying more on automation these days. It probably won't be long before we're seeing autonomous tractors in the field. But one thing we're seeing today is the use of robotic milking machines on dairy farms. This week we visit with the Leech family near Lexington, Virginia, to learn more about this cutting-edge technology. We also have a story on an educational display at the Children's Museum of Richmond in Short Pump that involves agriculture. Plus, we'll have some tips on growing hostas in the garden. Those stories and more on this episode of Virginia Farming. I'm Jeff Ishii. Well, Virginia is one of several states in the Mid-Atlantic region to be hosting a special workshop this spring on the topic of renovating fescue pastures. The Alliance for Grassland Renewal is working collaboratively with Virginia, North Carolina, Kentucky, and other states to help cattle producers learn more about toxicity found in tall fescue and how it can be managed. The location of the Virginia workshop will be Rafine in Rockbridge County. That event will take place on Thursday, March the 15th. More information can be found by calling your local office of Virginia Cooperative Extension. Well, the Virginia Soybean Association wants children and their parents to know more about where their food comes from. The organization has a prominent display at the Children's Museum of Richmond at Short Pump. The board of directors of the Virginia Soybean Association was looking for a way to demonstrate the importance of soybeans and the overall industry of agriculture. And then one day an idea was brainstormed involving soybeans on display at the Children's Museum of Richmond, located at Short Pump. That's according to the executive director of the Virginia Soybean Association, Shannon Ellis.
The inspiration is the Soybean Board, the Virginia Soybean Association Board, and the Virginia Soybean Board are looking for ways to connect with consumers. And one of the ways that we've always used is by educating consumers, and particularly children and their families. As a mother, I have enjoyed taking my own children to the Children's Museum, and so I just came up with this idea, and I went to them, and we were both on the same page. We both believed in hands-on learning, connecting consumers and producers, and this was just a really natural fit, and we were all enthusiastic about the idea. Both boards were completely on board with the concept, and the Children's Museum has been a natural partner for us to work with.
The primary goal of the display is simply this.
It would be that we're here to provide honest truth, and more importantly that we're moms and dads too, and we're raising children on the farms that are producing these soybeans. So we want them to we want to be able to provide them with the real knowledge and the facts, and for them to meet us and show them that we are just like them. We're moms and dads raising our children.
The soybean display is located at the Children's Museum of Richmond, located at Short Pump Center, and it's open 7 days a week. More information about the Virginia Soybean Association can be found at the website vasoybean.com. Well, every once in a while, cattle producers just need to stop, sit down, and think long and hard about the future of the beef industry. Bob Severa has the story from the American Angus Association.
It might be more convenient to look at far-off challenges and think you'll deal with them when they directly impact your bottom line, rather than investing time to get ahead of them now. But one futurist says today's niche food consumption trends could change your cattle business quicker than you think.
I think particularly from a producer's perspective, what's really important is not just to think maybe one step down the value or supply chain, but rather to the end consumer, an end consumer that's increasingly high maintenance, as we saw in today's presentation. You know, today 1 in 10 American millennials claim to be either vegetarian or vegan. You've got Bill Gates investing in, you know, Impossible Burgers, for example, or vegetarian burgers that bleed just like meat. And the consumer landscape is massively changing. And while those might be sort of micro trends right now, eventually what happens is that mind share actually leads to market share.
Telling a digital story is one way cattlemen can connect with consumers who buy their beef product.
And oftentimes there's a digital disconnect where they're not able to find the right information, and instead they find maybe disinformation online. And of course this is a problem for ranchers. If you don't take your storytelling into your own hands and amplify what actually goes on the farm, well, then you sort of have your own, you know, your own self to blame if the urban consumer is misinformed. So I think it's really important and certainly pertinent for the farmers and the ranchers to start telling their own story.
The futurist also says it's not too late to make changes that ensure your ranch is around for the next generation.
Imagine that it's now 2020 or 2025, and on your watch, the ranch went out of business. What were the trends that you missed? What were the, you know, signals from the market that you just chose to ignore? And what were the investment decisions that you delayed that led to that demise? And instead, start thinking about what change will you make today, either something that feels gut feel actually maybe right in terms of investing for the next few generations of ranchers, but also to ensure that there is a future for beef, which I think that there is a strong future for, by the way.
Sorman Nilsson grew up in a family business that's steeped in tradition, but he's recently watched his mother begin to adjust the sails.
And certainly in terms of her web presence, her social media presence, she's starting to now win what I call the digital minds and the analog hearts of tomorrow's customers. But I think any rancher who thinks that they're behind, well, that's probably a signal from the future that it's time to change today.
I'm Bob Cervera.
Thank you, Bob, for that report. Farm safety officials continue to remind farm families about the importance of keeping children safe on the farm. It is, of course, important to involve children in the daily activities on the farm, but be sure the chores assigned are appropriate for the age and the skill level of children involved. For instance, farm safety experts recommend that a child be at least 14 years old before being allowed to participate in cleaning a grain bin, and then only with adult supervision. More information about child safety on the farm can be found at the website cultivatesafety.org. Well, we are certainly seeing an increasing use of robotic milking machines on Virginia dairy farms. That's our focus on Ag Insights, coming up next.
Today we're in Lexington, Virginia, and we're visiting Ingleside Farm. And I'm joined by one of Ingleside's farmers, Linda Leech. Linda, thank you so much for having us out today.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you.
And this is primarily a dairy farm, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So how many head do you guys have on the farm?
On the farm, total from baby calves up through the adult cows, close to 800.
800, okay. And how many of those are you milking?
Right now we're milking about 340. That's actually milking and going in the tank, producing milk, and then another 80 that are dry, meaning they're pregnant, ready to have a calf, so they're not being milked right now. Then the remainder are replacement animals, young stock.
And this has continued to be in your family. I just met your son, Bo, and I know your daughter, Jennifer, plays a big role here on the farm. What do your family members, what roles do they play?
Okay, all of us are employed by Ingleside Dairy Farm. My husband, Charlie, is, I guess, the overall manager. But we're approaching the age where we're backing off, stepping out of management, turning that over to our children. He's involved with the crops, the cattle, anything involved with the farm. Our son Bo, he loves the equipment and field work. That's his main responsibility. However, if there's anything with the cows that needs to be done, he's able to step in and do what's needed. Jennifer, our daughter, is in charge of the cows. She would prefer working with the animals versus crops and tractors. So she's in charge of the herd health, the milking, and the employees we have that help milk and take care of the animals. And she also does the books, takes care of the financial records for the farm.
Okay.
And I'm they say I'm chef, but I don't cook that much. So,
But you make sure everybody's fed, right?
make sure everybody's fed. And my main responsibility is taking care of the young stock. After the calves are about 5 days old, I'm responsible for them through weaning, and then until they're about 600 pounds. So I do have about 120 to 150 animals that I take care of myself.
So you don't have all that many employees working on this very large farm, but part of that is because you use robotics.
Correct.
First of all, how did you come about deciding to put in robotic milkers?
Well, when both of our children graduated from college, came back to the farm, our herd had gotten large enough that in the conventional parlor we had a double 10 parallel, and we were spending too many hours a day milking cows and not having the time to do other things that needed to be done on the farm. Our daughter was doing a lot of the milking, and for anybody, that's just too long to be standing on concrete in a milking parlor. And part of that parlor was the original parlor from 1967. Of course, it had been expanded and updated throughout the years, but we knew that we needed to build a new parlor. So in, I guess, 2000, we were thinking about doing this in 2009, and that's when the dairy prices really took a dive, and every dairy farmer across the United States was actually losing money for several months. So the funds, of course, were not available in 2009, but then that gave us time to do research and visit other farms, and in our minds, we were going to build another conventional parlor and go somewhere on the farm away from where we were and build a new setup. And someone asked us about robots, and we were like, "You're crazy. They probably don't work. They cost too much. All kinds of negative issues with that." But our son said, "We need to look. We need to research." So we did, and we started visiting robotic dairies. And between the four of us, we visited close to 40 dairies that were milking with robotics. And when we talked to the farmers and actually saw how well the robotics were working, how happy the cows were very content, very friendly. And that's one of our goals, to have happy, contented
Well, of
cows.
course.
So we started crunching the numbers, doing that during our homework, and there wasn't that much difference between the cost of a conventional barn parlor versus putting in a robotic system. So we finally made the decision that was what we wanted to do, and in 2014 we started milking with 4 robotic units. We still milked about 80 cows in the parlor at that time. So the past 4 years we've had 80 to 100 cows in the parlor, and then 240 cows being milked by robotics.
Tell me how this works, because this is not like a parlor where they walk in and the arm just goes on and milks. This is entirely different, because you say the cows come in on their own whenever they feel like it.
Right.
So tell me how that works.
It's a free flow system where the robots are there 24 hours a day. And it's not a robot like R2-D2. A lot of people think that when you say it's a robot. It's a robotic system, more like what you would see in an automobile factory that does welding. It's an arm that moves under the cow and then attaches to the cow's udder. So the system is there 24 hours a day. The cows are free to come in whenever they feel like they want to come in to be milked. And they also get fed grain, and it's a highly palatable grain that entices the cows to come in to be milked. We have our parameters set where they will only be milked 6 times a day. And when I say only 6 times, that's a lot, for a cow to be milked. Our goal is, on the average, the cows will be milked 3 times a day.
Now, I just looked through the window earlier and saw one walk in
and she walked out. Tell me why.
It wasn't her time. She had been in, most likely, maybe an hour ago, and it will not milk a cow more frequently than she should be milked. And it also knows if a cow comes in, and normally that particular cow, maybe each time she comes in, gives 15 pounds of milk. But perhaps the last time she came in, for whatever reason, she only gave 5. It may decide, okay, she didn't give all of her milk last time for whatever reason, we're going to let her milk. But the cow that you saw, it was not time for her to be milked.
And how does the system recognize that?
Each cow wears a collar around her neck with a transponder located behind her ear. And that transponder on her collar communicates with the robotic unit when she walks in to be milked, and lets the robotic unit know who that cow is. And computers do wonderful things.
They keep track of everything,
They
don't
do.
they? It's amazing. Now, what happens if a cow doesn't show up? This had to take a little bit of training to get the cows used to this whole new system. How did you do all that?
The training period is, it takes, in 3 days after you first start, there are several cows that will start to come in on their own after 3 days. And then it seems that in 3 weeks, you're like, oh, there's a whole lot more cows are coming in on their own. After a month or so, most cows are coming on their own. But every day, twice a day, there are usually a few cows that have not been in. Those are our fetch cows. So twice a day, we do have to go into the barn and bring in the cows that haven't been milked within the last 13 hours. And the computer tells us who those cows are.
Okay.
There's
So
a list that is...
You can go gather them up and make sure they come in.
Right.
Does that
right.
happen? Are you seeing that they're starting, that list dwindles?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Because they
in the
like
new
it.
barn, yes. In the new barn, we've only been in it a week, and the cows are coming in on their own now, and it's working well.
So what are some of the advantages that you've seen going to a robotic system? Are the cows producing more? Are you getting more milk? Aside from the obvious that you don't have to man these. Now, I say that, but I know the phone rings or there's alarms that go off if anything happens, right?
Right. Yeah. The advantages are an increased milk production, just simply because the cow is getting milked more frequently. She produces more milk. The labor, we have reduced the amount of employees on the farm just through natural attrition. And when someone leaves, we haven't had to rehire to fill a certain position. Because this goes on 24 hours a day without a person being there, there is daily maintenance that does need to take place. And, that's very, very, just a few minutes a day
Right.
For daily maintenance. And one of the main things the robotic system does, instead of a person or 2 people or 3 or 4 milking the cows and spending their time standing there actually milking the cows, now you take that time and can take better care of your cows and do things that you haven't been able to do before just because you have more time.
Right.
And you're able to do what you need to do more on your own schedule. Instead of every morning the cows are going to be milked at 5 every morning. If there's a cow that you need to check on, well, you go check on that cow at 5 o'clock instead of, oh, I have to be milking the cows right now.
That's amazing. And I know that your daughter, who really manages the herd and your herd health, must be just really enjoying these printouts that she's getting, being able to see what every cow is doing.
Right.
I mean, and there's all kinds of things you can see if something needs to be managed from those reports.
Correct. Yeah, it's a huge management tool.
That's absolutely amazing. Okay. Now, what about the milk itself? Is there anything in the system that can detect if there's something maybe wrong with the cow, or
Right.
if maybe she might be running a fever, or there could be something going on with her?
Yes.
What happens then?
The first cc of milk from each cow is tested by the robotic system. It checks the temperature, which, you know, basically is the same temperature of the cow's body. It can do fat, protein, somatic cell count, color, clarity, conductivity.
Oh my goodness.
It can test the milk for so many different things. And if there is an issue with anything that is outside of the parameters, the computer will let you know. The system will let you know. And then you can go check on that cow and see if there is a problem.
Okay. So, if another farmer is interested in going to the robotic system, what do you suggest they do?
Visit a lot of other robotic dairies, talk to the farmers, pay attention to the cows, and for us that made up our mind. We had questions at the first farms we went to if robotics was really something that would work. And when we found out it would, just by visiting farmers and looking at their animals, it alleviated a lot of our worries.
Well, Linda, your farm is gorgeous. You have some beautiful ladies in there that are giving some nice milk.
Thank you.
And they all seem happy and healthy for sure.
Yes.
So thank you so much for having us out today. We really
Thank
do
you.
appreciate it.
I've enjoyed it.
We'll be right back.
Get ready to learn about hostas as we go in the garden with Mark Viette.
Determining the amount of shade you have is easy. Remember, morning sun is shade, could almost be considered heavy shade. Afternoon sun is sun, and almost could be considered full sun. But then we have something else that is filtered or bright shade. And that is where you see distinct shadows. Like around me, you'll see bright light and shady areas, and that changes on and off throughout the day. That is the best environment for my #1 favorite plant for the shade, hosta. Hosta are great. They get huge, they get big. You also have some that might be 2 inches in height, but then you have some that could be as tall as 5 feet, and it might get as wide as almost 7 feet. The bigger and older the hostas get, the prettier some of the varieties get. You can look at some of these giant leaves I just picked. They also make a great cut flower or in arrangements, but as they get older, you get this puckering. And if you look, and that's sort of a crepe papery look to them. As the leaves get older or the plants get older, they tend to take on certain varieties, this beautiful bluish haze. But hostas are great, and they can get to the size, one plant might be as big as a rhododendron. The fact that hosta, or some varieties, can get so big means they're economical because they cover a large area. And they also keep the weeds out. If you look at some of these hostas here, you can see how big they get, and you really don't see a lot of weeds in them. If by any chance you get a late spring frost or a hailstorm, you can go right in the garden and shear them back, or if the leaves don't look great, you can cut them back. One added advantage to hosta is that they have beautiful flowers. Not only are the flowers attractive, some types are fragrant, but the hummingbirds and the butterflies and your pollinators, including honeybees, also enjoy hosta. Keep in mind you can plant anywhere from 3, 5, 7 in a group. In fact, you can create a whole shade garden just with hosta. Maybe something looking like waves of golds, yellows, blues, and greens. The larger the grouping, sometimes the more attractive your garden will be. I'm Mark Viette. Join me next time in the garden.
Our pearl of wisdom this week comes from President Dwight D. Eisenhower, who once said, "Farming looks mighty easy when your plow is a pencil and you're 1,000 miles from the cornfield." Submit your own pearl of wisdom through our website at virginiafarming.com. That does it for our show this week. Have a great week, everyone. I'm Jeff Ishii for Virginia Farming. And now for your ag trivia question of the week, the answer when we return.
90 years ago, the Virginia Farm Bureau made our local farmers a promise to protect and preserve a way of life they work so hard to establish. We want to keep Virginia, Virginia. Anyone can be a Farm Bureau member, and there's a local Farm Bureau in every county. More information is at vafarmbureau.org.
Virginia soybean farmers are hard at work growing soybeans to produce products you use every day. Candles, soaps, even crayons can be made from soybeans. Remember, when you buy soy, you're helping to support American jobs, the economy, and our nation's energy security.
And now the answer to your Ag Trivia question of the week. A. Chincoteague.